If you're like my tax attorney, you're scared of going on a cruise ship. And it might seem silly to someone who's cruised a lot, but there are a lot of people who do feel this way. And I wanted to debunk why you really shouldn't be scared to go on a cruise. It's important to remember that the odds of dying on a cruise ship are about 1 in 62.5 million. Over the years, there have been 623 reported deaths on cruise ships, and there are all sorts of reasons that could happen. Most of it is, by the way, natural causes. But if you're considering that, and that's the factor alone that's going to keep you from cruising, you should probably remember that the odds of dying in a car accident, according to the National Safety Council, is 1 in 93. Yeah, 1.08% chance. In my opinion, the reason why fears of dying on a cruise ship are probably as widespread as they are is because, well, quite frankly, the media perpetuates this myth often enough. Because when someone dies on a cruise ship, it makes big headlines. Someone dies in a car accident, it barely gets reported in your local news, certainly not national news. Cruise ships, for some reason, tend to get a lot of international exposure whenever something bad happens to them. I think, quite frankly, this is part of a society's infatuation with bad news, number one. Number two, the whole Titanic thing still raises its head. And whenever there's just bad things that can happen, people being quote-unquote stuck, because when you're on a cruise ship, it's a little more different than when you're stuck on the side of I-95 in Maryland, it tends to really just get a lot more attention. So even though there's very, very, very few people that die on a cruise ship, it just gets so much more attention, exponentially more than obviously the number of people who unfortunately die in car accidents. Another really common fear about going on a cruise ship is being stuck out at sea and drowning in the ocean or something like that. For a lot of people, it's almost like imagining the size of space. If you ever try to do that one night and it kind of freaks you out, I can kind of understand that. Certainly the ocean is a big place, but you need to remember that more often than not, your cruise ship is actually closer to land than you might think. If you look at most cruises, especially traditional 3 to 7 night cruises, you're basically just going between different ports of call, and you're rarely that far away from any piece of land. The Caribbean especially is a great example of this because there are islands everywhere, and you're usually within range of certainly an medevac helicopter or other Coast Guard facilities that can assist. Piggybacking on the topic of people dying on a cruise ship in general, let's remind everybody that cruise ships rarely do sink. The most notable occurrence in the last, 50 years was likely the Costa Concordia, but that's an example of the captain having criminal negligence, not a fundamental failure in the systems or the ship itself, just somebody really doing something they shouldn't have been doing, which is obviously an outlier situation. I mean, the guy deliberately turned off some of the systems monitoring seabed, forgot his reading glasses, stubbornly felt like he didn't need assistance in navigating the area, all because he wanted to impress 2 women he invited to the bridge. That is very much not what you can expect on any other cruise, and obviously, it's been a number of years, over 10 in fact, since the Costa Concordia incident. Along those lines, I think some people also are very much afraid of falling overboard. The reality is you cannot fall overboard the way you think you can. Meaning, it's not like a Scooby-Doo cartoon where you're minding your own business, slip on a banana peel, and go overboard off the side of the ship. Doesn't happen. Reason? Because there are too many safety protocols in place to prevent that from occurring. The most notable is that the balcony railings need to be at least chest high, and that's chest high on most adults. In fact, if you ever do go on a cruise, and I would recommend you do it, just walk up to the balcony railing or a railing at a public deck, and you're going to see you really have to make an effort to go overboard. And that's the most important thing to remember. People that go overboard, despite, again, what the media reports, are usually the occurrence of one of 2 things. 1, somebody doing something they're not supposed to do, or being somewhere they're not supposed to be. As an example, if somebody were to climb over the railings in order maybe to get a photo or for whatever reason, well, now you're bypassing the primary safety protocol, and then if you did fall, well, yeah, it's because you were doing something you weren't supposed to do, and you were somewhere you weren't supposed to be. Of course, if there was foul play at hand with somebody murdering somebody, again, not something you could accidentally run into, certainly, that's because somebody else acting upon that. But the idea that you would simply fall off the side of the ship, minding your own business, a bump here or there, it's not going to happen. I think in general, a lot of people simply are afraid of the open ocean. And one of the things that you often hear from new cruisers is that they always say something along the lines of, quote, "It doesn't feel like we're on a ship," end quote. And that's because these cruise ships are massive. It feels like a city, not a fishing boat, because a lot of people don't have the context of what a cruise ship, quite frankly, looks like. So they just imagine what it might look like having been on a fishing boat or a ferry or something like that. But cruise ships are enormous, especially Royal Caribbean's cruise ships, which are some of the biggest in the world. In fact, if you look at our channel here, you'll find full walkthrough ship tours that show you everywhere that you can walk around the ship. And that's important to understand because the scale of these ships is such that not only are they massive vessels, but you really don't feel like you're on the ocean in a lot of cases. So much of the experience is inward facing that you're just distracted, quite frankly, from what's going on outside. And I think a lot of cruisers would agree with me by saying that you have to make an active effort to actually go out and stare at the ocean or enjoy the scenery going by because there's just so much happening on board. There are shows, there's dinner, there's a casino, there's entertainment, there's music, there's movies, there's naps. All of that occurs without looking at the ocean. In addition, cruise ships are also equipped with an insane amount of redundancy. You're going to find systems upon systems, multiple engines, multiple propellers. So that way the ship isn't really going to be crippled anywhere without help. Now going back to what I mentioned earlier, if they were in a situation where there's an engine issue, they're again never too far away. To truly be on an itinerary that takes you truly far from land, you would have to book like a transatlantic or a trans-Pacific cruise. So as a new cruiser, don't book those sailings and you'll be fine. And I'll be the first to admit, those sailings, transatlantic, trans-Pacifics, things like that, those are outliers. That's like makes up 1 or 3% of the total Royal Caribbean cruises you can pick. Most people are taking cruises around the Mediterranean, Caribbean, or panhandle of Alaska. And in all these places, you're really not that far from land to have any kind of assistance should that be required. But what about external factors? How about a hurricane? That's a pretty scary thing. They're giant storms. They can have winds of over 100 miles an hour. How do cruise ships deal with that? And it's quite simple. They just don't go near them. Cruise ships, first of all, can travel faster than the weather. So that's a really important factor to understand. Number two, Royal Caribbean, as an example, has its own weather staff. They actually have a chief meteorologist, Craig Setzer, who used to be actually a TV meteorologist, and his job is to monitor the weather, see where storms are coming in. Just like at home, when you're seeing a hurricane on the horizon and it's 3 or 5 days out, Royal Caribbean can see that as well and make necessary changes. The bottom line is your cruise ship is not going into a hurricane. Number two, you don't have to worry about a hurricane popping up. That doesn't happen. Hurricanes, unlike tornadoes or earthquakes, take time to develop, they're slow, and usually there's many days in advance to give you warning of what to happen. And if there is a hurricane predicted to be anywhere in the area your cruise ship's going to be, you're going to change itineraries, move it around. Occasionally it's canceled, but it's pretty rare. More often than not, they just switch around itineraries and sail somewhere else. And then there's the fear of getting seasick. And certainly you could have experienced something similar to this on land, whether it's motion sickness on a car, on an amusement ride, wherever. Fear of getting seasick is something that might keep you from going on a cruise. The good news is seasickness can be remedied very, very easily and very, very quickly. The most common form of seasickness medication to use is something like Dramamine or Bonine. These are over-the-counter medications that you can purchase before the cruise. You take it once a day, every 24 hours, and you're good to go. There is a downside to these things. Oftentimes, they might make you a little bit drowsy, so you're going to have to take a nap on vacation. Really not a big deal at all. There are other ways to treat seasickness on a cruise, including ginger drops or chews. You could eat a green apple. You can actually go to your doctor and ask for a prescription patch to put behind your ear. And all these are very effective at combating seasickness. It does happen occasionally. More often than not, the ship rarely moves enough for you to feel it to the point of getting seasick, but it can happen. It's happened to me, in fact. And when that happens, I just have my seasickness medication packed away, I bring it with me, and I'm good to go. In all, most of the fears people have about going on a cruise are fairly irrational based on a lot of things they might have seen in media, movies, TV, and all that. The bottom line is these things should not stop you from going on a cruise. A lot of these fears, in my opinion, are overplayed in people's minds, and when you actually experience it for yourself, you would see the reality of it. In fact, I'm sure in the comments below, you will see a lot of people who will write, I had those same fears, and that kept me from going on a cruise, and then they tried it out and ended up loving it. Let me know in the comments below if you are one of those people, and if you are truly still afraid, haven't tried it yet, and have an apprehension about going on a cruise, let us know about what is stopping you so we can explain to you why that fear might be unwarranted. While you're below our video, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way, YouTube lets you know of a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.